Hello and welcome to the Acting Notes. I'm Justin Powell. Today we're going to talk about in-person auditions. I know they don't happen too often anymore, but I feel like because of that, it's important to understand some of the do's and don'ts of in-person auditions because we're not going to have that same amount of practice that we had before, right? For a lot of us, we're going to be doing self-tapes and only occasionally getting to go in the room. And so we might be out of practice when it comes to those moments. Hopefully this video can help. So auditions are obviously important because in many ways they're the gateway to success. If you aren't good at auditioning, you're probably not going to get many jobs. And if you don't get many jobs, you're not going to be able to do the thing you want to do, which is act. In reality, I imagine for most of us, we spend more time auditioning than we do actually doing the work. And it's a little bit different, right? I think once we have a job, we often feel a bit more confident. We feel like we can take some more chances in the work. Sometimes that's the case. Other times we feel the total sense of imposter syndrome and we're like, why did they hire me? They must know that I'm no good, which isn't true, but we think that. So the better we can get at auditioning, the better it will be for our career. Now with a video on auditioning, I don't think I'm going to be able to cover every topic that is necessary because there's just so much that can go into it. So if you want to see another video on auditions, on self-tapes, let me know in the comments below. And if you have any questions, I'd like to do a Q&A video soon. So if you have questions about anything around the acting process or the business, put them in the comments and I'll try to include them in the video. The first thing to do when you get an audition that you know is in person is something that you should do for every audition anyway. You should research the project. So who is involved in this project? Who's directing it? Who's producing it? Who's already attached to the project? This way, when you walk into the room, you're not going to be thrown off if you see George Clooney sitting across from you. It also might help you understand what tone this project might be in. If you can review the kind of work that the director has done before or the producers have produced, you might get an idea of what they're looking for in the audition process.
It's a fire sale.
Oh! Okay, I didn't, well, let's give it a shot. Oh my God! We're having a fire sale!
Now, I don't think we should put too much stake into that, right? Because if we start worrying about what exactly the casting director is looking for, it can lock us up and it can take us away from our own innate creativity, from our own impulses that are the things that set us apart from other actors that might actually get us the role. But at the same time, it's good to know if the project is something that is more dramatic or leans dramatic, if it's something that's bigger. I mean, if you were auditioning for Yorgos Lanthimos' film, you know that the way that he directs movies, they all speak in a different way than a lot of other movies.
Understand, me never lived outside God's house.
What?
So Bella's so much to discover. And your sad face makes me discover angry feelings for you.
So if you went in there and just did it kind of casually and nonchalant, you probably wouldn't get cast because you clearly don't understand what the director might be going for. So I think there's a balance to that question, as there is to most things. Next thing to do is consider the genre of the piece. We kind of talked about this already with the producers and the directors. And some people say that you should never worry about genre. Don't even worry about it. Just go in there and act. And I, again, kind of disagree with this. I think there's some truth to it. But at the same time, if you go in acting as though you're about to be in a drama, but it is a sitcom audition, then you're probably not going to book that part. It doesn't matter how beautifully dramatic you are. If you are not in the world of the show or in the world of the script, then it kind of doesn't matter. So think about what kind of show or project it is. You know, is it an hour medical drama? That's going to be different than a half-hour sitcom. And there's all these different genres that can clue you into the kind of acting you might want to do. Always plan to get there early. Give yourself time to find parking, to not feel rushed as you're heading to the office or the room. You know, sometimes it's tough to find. If you don't know the studio, if you've never been to this spot before, you might have trouble finding the location and you don't want to be running in just in the nick of time, but sweating and out of breath and flustered because you were nervous you were going to be late. Give yourself time to get there early. And, you know, this is a rule I have in LA, and I will probably take it anywhere I go, which is always bring a book. You know, if you get there early and you have time to kill, just read a book. Your audition really starts right when you walk in the building, right? Because if you walk in and you're kind of disconnected or you're distant from the person who's checking everyone in, you know, sometimes casting directors will talk to them. They'll say, hey, how did that person seem in the room? And if you give off the energy of someone who is very kind to casting directors, but you're rude to the people working for them, then they might think you're not a very good person. And frankly, if that is what you do anyway, if that's just something you like to do, just reflect a little bit. That's a mirror behind me. Take a look in one yourself and just reflect on yourself a little bit. So when you walk in there, it's already begun. Be friendly, be kind, and then just take your seat and wait. I see a lot of actors in the waiting room that are still going over their lines, and if you feel that's something you need, then feel free to do that. I think my philosophy on it is that if you don't have the lines by the time you get to that waiting room, you're probably not going to get them in the 10 minutes before you go inside. So instead of worrying about your lines, that's why I say bring a book, bring something that you can do that will relax you and you can just be present. Most audition rooms are perfectly fine with you having the sides, so it's all right if you're not off book. Now let's get into some of the little tidbits and rules that I think are helpful. When you walk into the room, don't go shake everyone's hands. Now you can. I personally think it's best to let them guide you. If they stand up and look like they're looking for a handshake, then go give them a handshake. But I don't think it's smart to go in there and start shaking hands, especially because you never know how many people are in there. So you might go in and, you know, just walk up to the director and shake their hand, and then you notice that there's 6 other people, and so now you're going down the line shaking everyone's hand. There's something kind of awkward about that.
Hi. Hi.
Hello, Ryan.
Hi.
What do you have for us?
Oh.
And you just said, hi, hi, hi.
I think just walking in and giving a nice wave is totally fine. Now, this is a weird rule, but I picked this up when I took Leslie Kahn in Los Angeles, and I see the value behind it, which is don't ask how they're doing when you walk in. That seems weird, right? Because it seems like that would be a great question to ask. It shows that you care about them, that you want to engage with them. But here's the problem. You know, best case scenario, they just say, fine, how about you? But worst case scenario, they start talking about something kind of sad, and then you have to try and get it back on track to them feeling good about you and about the audition that they're about to watch. So maybe don't ask, how are you doing? Walk in, say hello, set up the space as you want it. If there's a chair, you can take it. You don't have to. Use the space as you'd like. I think a lot of times you'll see actors that will walk into the audition room and they'll see a chair in the center, and so they'll just sit, even though that's not how they want to do the scene. They'll do it because they think that's what they must want. And sometimes that's the case, but oftentimes it's just because the actor before decided to use a chair. So walk in and take some ownership of the room. If you want that chair, use the chair. If you don't want it, move it out of the way as you're talking to them. Sometimes a question you'll get is, how's your day going? Or tell us something about you. Now in this case, I think it's a good idea not to talk about acting. So if you just talk about how you're an actor and you love acting, they get that. They know you're an actor because you're here auditioning for them. Usually this is more a question that is designed to get to know you a little bit. So instead share something interesting about you, and something that's true, of course. I only say that because I have met actors who tell me that they lie when they're asked those kind of questions to appear more interesting, and I just think that could fall through so quickly. So instead talk about you. You know, if they ask me, for example, what I like doing, I might talk about how I love playing Dungeons & Dragons, how I went for a hike recently, how I'm sore from my workout this morning. Basically, I just talk about things that I actually am interested in, and oftentimes there's something for someone to bite there. One of my best answers I ever had was when a casting director asked me, how's your day going? And I said, it's been kind of weird. I had to shave my cat this morning. And we got into a 15-minute conversation about the process of shaving my cat because she shed so much. And that was great. I ended up booking the role, and it was only because of that conversation. I actually totally wrecked my audition. No, I'm sure the audition was fine, and I don't think that was necessarily a deciding factor, but it gave us this fun jumping off point. We started talking about pets, we were joking with each other. It became much more comfortable in the room because of that, which I think allowed me to do better work. And also let them know, hey, if we cast this guy, he's going to be cool to hang out with for a couple months. Which is totally not true, but you know, I got him. So when it comes to the audition itself, make a bold choice. That's it, that's the note. Moving on. We hear that all the time, right? We hear make a bold choice, but what does that really mean? I think sometimes actors can use that to mean, I'm gonna make a choice that is so out of left field, they won't see it coming. I'm gonna play this dramatic scene of a husband breaking up with his wife, like the husband's an alien. What a bold choice. The way that I found that to be helpful in my career is just trying to view the scene from a different lens. You know, sometimes you'll get a scene that seems so clearly like you need to be yelling the whole time, or like it's a real sad crying scene. And I think instead playing it in a slightly different way, it just opens up something new for casting directors. We have to think of it from their perspective too. They have watched so many tapes, or perhaps that day have just seen so many people come in and give probably a very similar performance of these scenes. So even if you make a choice that doesn't exactly line up with what they're thinking, it can be refreshing for them to see, and oftentimes it just leads them to an opportunity for a note that they can give you. I do think the bold choices should always come from you, right? It shouldn't just be, I'm going to do this the opposite because Justin from the acting notes said to make a bold choice. It's not a good reason. Instead, try to find something that you find interesting in it. I had an audition recently where I was playing a very creepy father, and I talked to the director after they booked me, and they told me part of the reason they cast me was because all the other tapes they saw were these men playing the scene very aggressively and angrily, whereas I played it very nice. I was a father who was trying to be nice to my kid until they just made me too upset, and then my anger wasn't loud, it was quiet, it was soft, but it was forceful. Now, I don't know that it was necessarily better than the other tapes. I didn't see the other tapes, I have no idea. But the difference was something that stood out to them and kind of showed them what they actually wanted from the character in that circumstance. And that's something to think about too, particularly in breakdowns for characters, because oftentimes we'll see the breakdowns and we try to get into the head of what they wrote, right? It'll say, charming, confident jock, but he has a dark side. And so we try to think, ooh, how do I be confident and charming but dark? How do I do it? But oftentimes those character descriptions are written by, you know, casting assistants who are just getting it done really quick. They're not entirely sure what they want from the character. It's just an idea. So I think the best thing we can do is just bring ourselves authentically to the work. What's something you have that you could share in this role? You know, this is now just kind of talking acting technique, but I always think about what would it take in my life to have gotten to the situation of this character, to have become this way. And that way, it's always a bit more personal. There's more of myself in there. It's more alive, I think. So make that bold choice. And oftentimes, you're going to get a note in these in-person auditions. And sometimes these notes have nothing to do with your performance. They might see something that they want to change. But sometimes they just want to see how good are you at collaborating, at working with others, at taking direction. And this is a sneaky little method I learned, again, from Leslie Kahn that I love. When someone gives you a note, you can actually kind of try that note out on them. So let's say, for example, I have a line that is, get back to the car. The director stops me and says, here's your note. Could you say that a bit angrier? What I would say to that is, I love that. Do you mean like this? Get back to the car. It's a great reading by me. And in that moment, I try their note out for them. I let them see what it looks like. And that does two things. One, it shows them I'm listening and that I can take direction right away. It also clarifies for me what they want in the next take. It also gives them a chance to see if they actually like their note or not. If they gave the note and they say, oh, actually, you know what, that's too much. Maybe let's try the other way. Can you try it happier? Then that gives you a better chance of showing them what they want. And also showing now a third way that you could do it. Showing just how collaborative you are. I also think responding to any note with "I love that" is a good idea. It just shows your positivity, shows that you care. Also, take notes. I've been working with an actor recently, and they fight every note they're given. And honestly, particularly in the exploration process of rehearsal, which is what this was in this case, that is such a maddening thing to watch. Notes are not necessarily critiques on your acting. Oftentimes, it's just trying to see something new, and we should be open to those explorations. Life is spontaneous. So if someone gives us a note to try something new, just say yes and, right? Use improv. So when you finish the audition, this is kind of the last stage, try not to be awkward when you leave. Sometimes you'll see actors that just linger around and just wait, and it's a bit uncomfortable. If they ask you if you have any questions, if you genuinely have questions, then ask away, but don't sit there trying to think up questions or anything like that. It's not necessary, it's just them providing you an opportunity if you have any questions. And if not, just thank them for their time and leave. I often think too, this is just like little things, saying things like, thank you so much for seeing me, or thank you for making time for me. I think that comes off as kind of weak. It feels as though they did you a service by seeing you, when in reality you're there to help them, right? They have a problem. They need to cast this role for this project. You're there to be a solution to that problem. Now, it doesn't mean that you should go the complete opposite direction and be like, you're welcome, and then walk out, although I'd love that. But I think there's a balance. I think, like most things, there's a balance. And when you leave the room, you can just say, thank you so much, and then head out. Thank you so much, have a good day, head out. So I hope this video helps. I know it's not huge on acting technique, but I feel like it's something that I see actors stumble with. Just a lot of these little social etiquette things that I think can make a difference. I don't think they are deal breakers, a lot of them. I think if you linger around a little bit, but you just gave the performance of a lifetime, that might be okay. But I do think these things add up. And so the more we can, push the odds in our favor, the better. Ooh, another good point is, should you enter the room in character? I don't think so. I think whatever works for your process is obviously good. I think at some point you should at least drop out of the character. So if you walk in character, once you finish the scenes, drop out of it so they know you're, not insane. But I think honestly, the best thing to do is just walk in as yourself, say hello, and then if you need to take a moment before the scene starts to kind of find the character, ask for that moment. I think ideally we want to be perceived as confident and as someone who's cool to hang out with. Not even necessarily cool, just someone who's not going to be a total jerk on set. So I hope this video helps. Let me know below if you have any tips for how to do in-person auditions, things that you found that work for you. And again, please leave me some questions for a Q&A video. I would love to answer any questions you have about acting or the business or anything, life. Check us out on Instagram and TikTok, although I don't really post on TikTok too often anymore. But check us out on Instagram at The Acting Notes. You can also check out the podcast, The Acting Notes, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. And I think that's it. Have a great day. Peace.